Jennie Joseph presents The Hands That Caught Us, a legacy podcast series with our midwife elders, an archival offering through the Perinatal Pause Podcast with Jennie Joseph, where we rest, reclaim, and remember one story at a time. Welcome to The Hands That Caught Us, a sacred series within the Perinatal Pause Podcast with Jennie Joseph. In each episode, we sit in reverence with our elder midwives, keepers of ancestral knowledge, community healers, and witnesses to the sacred continuum of life. These conversations are a pause, a restoration, and a reclaiming of our birthright. These are the stories that built us, and these are the stories that sustain us.
It is my distinct pleasure to welcome the awesome Makeda Karma to the podcast today. Makeda, girl.
Hi, how you doing? What's up?
Oh, Makeda. I could not wait to get to do this episode. You don't know.
Oh God, I don't know why. I just came from yoga, so I'm rejuvenated, and I went to the market and got papaya, mango, all kind of stuff, all locally grown.
You are beyond rejuvenated. You are like, I don't know, this Energizer Bunny person that I've never known you any other way than to be on the go, on the move, changing the world, inspiring us all. I mean, God bless you.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm humbled. I'm humbled.
Well, we've been having this series of discussions, talking with the Black elder midwives in the United States. The movement is such an old movement at this point. I mean, if we really go all the way back, we're starting from enslavement, from when the African midwives were forcibly brought to this country. Makeda, let's start from the beginning. When did midwifery hit you? How did you find yourself even here, all the way back?
It was not intentional. It had nothing to do with me. That's about all I can say. I graduated from Brandeis University in 1972. I'm very proud to be one of the first graduates of an African and African-American history major. My parents were upset. Who goes to college and study about Black people and Africans? They said, how are you going to get a job? Very practical Panamanian Caribbean parents. But that was my option. And in April, one of my college friends, because that year was a momentous year because Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And Black students, that was in April, and Black people took to the streets. And many universities that didn't even bother to allow Black people in. It had nothing to do with whether you could do the work or not. It was just the rampant racism in the US at that point opened up their doors. And I went to a summer program at Brandeis and did very well. And I was offered a full-time scholarship to go to Brandeis University. And it completely changed my life. As I said, with the assassination of Martin Luther King, and many of us became revolutionized with the Black Power movement and Off the Pig, which by the way, got me to stop eating pork and eating much better, the movement. And that's how I got involved. After graduating, I went to Tanzania because I had written an honors thesis on education for self-reliance. And I wanted to go to Tanzania to work under our ancestor, Mwalimu Nyerere. Mwalimu means teacher. Because Tanzania, he had done something very unusual when they got their independence. So instead of continuing in English and being under the English, and remember, Tanzania had become a trusteeship and had been given to the Germans, and they were called Tanganyika. And then there was the island of Zanzibar. So the two of them joined and formed Tanzania. And he was a socialist president. And what he did was something that no other African country has done since. He made an African language the main language, no French, no English, no nothing. And he chose the language not of his own ethnic group, but he chose the language that was spoken not only locally, but in Kenya and in surrounding countries so that we could speak to each other without these boundaries. And so he said, from now on, Africa begins in Africa. And so Kiswahili became the national language. He made education free for everyone from childhood to the university. And that was a tremendous investment because you don't get your full product and get any benefit from it from 20 years. And this was a poor colony at the time because they were given to the Germans after the World War. So it was a novel. And not only that, he opened up Tanzania to be the base for all the liberation movements in Southern Africa. Walter Rodney was teaching at the University of Dar at that time, and I met him. You had all the Black Panthers that had been exiled and left because for enjailment. You know, Assata Shakur just died. She went to Cuba, but many of them went to, like Imze, who is still alive. They went to Tanzania for refuge instead of being incarcerated for the rest of their life. So you had all these liberation groups, all this power stuff, all this stuff going on in Tanzania, and my life was completely changed as a result. And it was an honor to work on the Imwalimu. It was an honor to see what happens when we can unite and when we can each one teach one, because every weekend students from the university went, and even elementary school went into the villages, and they were teaching everyone to read and write in Kiswahili. So Tanzania right now is one of the most educated or literate, better say, countries in Africa. So
wow, what years was this again? Can you just tell me?
1972. And I was teaching at this secondary school called Weru Weru Secondari. That's secondari, that's how you would say it in Kiswahili. And I didn't have a refrigerator. And at that time when I moved in, all I had was a bed. I mean, it was very modest. And to get into the center of town was 7 miles, and you either have to walk or hitch a ride. It was safe to hitch a ride. And so if a lot of things happened, not eating all this processed foods and the walking and the change in diet. I not to be offensive, my period changed. I went from very bad cramps and long to very short periods and all this stuff to almost hardly any bleeding. And the only thing that had changed was my lifestyle. So I met this sister named Aisha. She was living at a town of maybe 100 miles from me. And she kind of, you know, she was vegan. So she influenced me, and she then taught me a lot. And from that and reading different books, I began to learn more about nutrition and health and wellness. That when I witnessed this baby being born, after one of my students took me to her village to visit, because their family lived on the slopes of the Kilimanjaro mountain, and I saw a baby being born. I'd never seen anything like that. It was so simple. And this woman had, you know, she apologized to her husband because she had another girl. And I said, oh God, this is something. All right. And I went back home. It was very beautiful, very natural, hardly any blood, nothing like I had even would have imagined. And we returned to the school grounds, and one night on a full moon night, and you know, I don't know, many people go to Moshi to see the Kilimanjaro mountain, but they never see it because you have to have a full moon. And there was this full moon, and I was told that this is what I was supposed to do. I said, me, midwifery? No, I'm going to be a historian. I'm going to become a professor of African and African-American history. I was going to do this and do that. No, I don't like blood. That's not me. And so I returned to the States, and that's what I got involved in with Shafia and teaching women, which I had started before I went to Africa, teaching women how to do their own self-exams. You know, the women's movement in the 60s and 70s really influenced me moving into midwifery as and so because this is what the universe had asked me to do, and everything kept happening to me that prompted me to do that. And I linked up with Shafia, and
Shafia Monroe.
when she lived, she's from Boston.
That's right.
And we started doing births there. As a matter of fact, we were known as the post-dates midwife, because one of the things that happened was the women's movement, while it liberated us, forced the patriarchy to try to put clamps through medicine on birth. Because when I grew up, you had a birth month. If you didn't have a due date, you were either going to be, when you're going to have the baby, March, April, or this and that. There was never this push about this sacred date to have a baby. And so we got involved, and once this dating became, Shafia and I actually became known as the post-dates midwives, because we did babies when the mother went into labor. And so that started me in the move, and then it's from there that it evolved. I moved to Ann Arbor, got involved with more of the women's health movement there, and that's how I ended up becoming a midwife. And I was originally wanting to be a traditional midwife, so I'm happy I learned through midwives like Shafia, and there was this sister that I met in Africa called Aisha. So that when I was forced to even deciding to going to become a nurse midwife, I trusted birth and understood it, which made my education in midwifery school to become a certified nurse midwife very difficult. I almost flunked out because it's a completely different way of thinking.
I mean, you described the calling even. I mean, every last one of us was called, right? And I'm thinking as I'm hearing you share this story, and it's so powerful, you not only got your calling just totally out of the blue, but in Africa,
yes,
in the middle of perhaps a very empowering experience inside of everything else you were doing, poof, it just shows up.
it was just I I didn't even realize people live on the Kilimanjaro on the slopes, and it's a whole different world and all these different things. And I was just 21 years old. Come on,
That's the other piece, isn't it? So you said yes to that calling. So
Yes,
you return back to Boston, you hook up with Shafia, and you supported the underground movement of midwifery in Boston, right? Would you consider
yes, I
it that?
did. Yes, I
Mhm.
did. My
What
first
years? What years are we
uh,
talking about?
we're talking since from 1972. My first solar birth, by after I left Boston, I moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to my husband, ex-husband, was going to work on his PhD. I had been accepted in the School of Public Health to get a master's in public health, and I got involved with the local home birth movement there. And I did my first solar birth in 1977.
All
Uh,
right.
I was scared of, I should say this, I was scared of scrap because, yes, I did it with Shafia, but never by my lonesome. And this sister, this Rasta sister, she and her husband, bless her soul, she was killed in an automobile accident, crash. Her car broke down on the highway in Atlanta, and somebody ran into her, and she passed away. Mama Africa. She said, "No, you can do it. I know you can do it. You're going to catch my baby." And I said, "But and we had a beautiful birth. And it was her trust in me and my
Yes.
trust in the little skills that I had that brought the first birth, baby being born at home, into my hands. And it kind of took off from then."
Wow. So
It's
amazing. It's so deep. And it's also so like every day for someone like you, because it's not like you've been that different person along the way and come back, and you have been deep in
yeah.
midwifery. So from having the access to the traditional midwives to the natural ways of birthing, you chose to go to nursing school. Talk about that.
Um, Again, Shafia keeps coming up. Um, I have to give her props because Shafia really knows how to organize. And she had started this group in Boston called Traditional Childbearing Group, educating women and stuff like that while helping them along with home births. And she had become a force in the Boston midwifery scene. So they were proposing this one of a kind program at Boston University. And so she assigned me to go and work with the group of people. She says, you have all those degrees. You go sit down at the
You were
table.
sent.
Yeah. And while we were there organizing this program, which is that it no longer exists, it lasted for 5 years rather. And there are only 85 graduates of this program. And it's the only one of its kind because all midwifery schools are in nursing programs. So it did take nursing, but it was not a requirement to study midwifery. So what I did is that I not only got midwifery groundations, midwives that were from different countries that had come to Boston, who were midwives, traditional midwives in their countries, were able to go to this program and become certified nurse midwives. But it was the first women's health program. We were not only going to deal with the birth of babies, we were going to learn to take care of women from their born through the spectrum of their lives. So it was a very unique program. First, it was in a school of public health, and it was based on the concept that health, that good health is what we have been endowed with, and pregnancy is not a sickness. And so therefore, we don't need to look at it that way. We're going to look at it within the public health and the wellness concept. So it was a whole different approach. So I said, well, I'm helping to set up the program. Let me apply. And I applied and I got a full ride. And we were the first 10 there were 10 of us, and only 8 graduated because 2 were not, once you fail certain classes and stuff, and so we were the first graduates of that program.
What year was that?
When was it? 1984, 85.
Okay. And ran for about 5 years, you said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was pioneering, clearly.
It was pioneering because I was already doing births with Shafia in Boston. We were very well known. I moved to Ann Arbor and I continued working, and and one of the things I'm saying this not to, because I've met midwives from all over the world. Some are certified, some are traditional, some are not. And I honor all these different professions and all these different pathways. But I must say that having learned birth and accepting it as a natural part of life helped me to even go on to become certified so I can serve people and sisters in the greater community, because I had a different perspective on birth. I didn't look at it as an accident waiting to happen. I looked at it as something we've been doing from the beginning of time, and mothers know how to give birth and babies know how to be born. And we are the only mammals that I know of that have to be delivered off. So it gave me a whole different approach. In addition, living and working in Africa at such a tender age, I was 21, and drawn into this movement in Tanzania, solidified it, because there, many of the women in the village where I lived, that's what they did. They just had their babies. I said, oh, okay. So this is how it works. And all of this came together. And here I am today. Fast forward, it's 1976. And I'm thinking of 2025. And I'm now 76. Yeah. And I'm thinking of taking on just being a grandma and being me and traveling and retiring. I never thought about it.
You're talking about 50 years, Magda. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, yes, you look like you're all of 41, but here you are. You're talking about 50 years in the work.
And just yesterday, I mean, I did this home birth, day before, I think it was Thursday, because I went and I saw clients at the clinic. Yes, yesterday was Friday. I didn't even know what day it was when I woke up this morning. But I just had this baby, and I said I'm not doing it anymore.
You've
And
been saying that for a while.
I know,
We know
but it
better
was
than to believe you, obviously.
but it was a nice birth. I had taken care of her prenatally. It was okay. And she only lived 2 minutes from me. And she
Perfect.
called and she said and we had a beautiful birth. And this lady is so skinny. And I was worried about her because, that's why you just have to go. You cannot use all these parameters, because had she seen somebody, she would have been diagnosed with poor uh, development, because she was very small and had an 8-pound baby. You see, so
That's
you
what
can't.
happens. Those little ones will spit out some big old heifer lumps in minutes as well. They don't play.
No, the
My
baby was
skinniest
8 pounds
women,
one.
right? They're the
Point one.
ones that go for it and boom, boom, here's your baby. And like, thank you very much.
Yes,
Where was that child hiding, right?
I know. Because I took care of her during her pregnancy, and she wanted to do this. Um, and so it was and she is a very private person. She doesn't like to be touched. Um, and even when I went there, I didn't do a cervical exam because
Okay.
she doesn't like this. But I could tell, she's in labor. I know, you have to respect women. I don't know why, but she is petrified. I did a pap because she hadn't had a pap in a long time. And I think it's a very good test, personally. It eliminated a lot of cancers. And so it was like if I was raping her. So I'm very cognizant about
Yes.
not touching. So, I mean, if she wants to push, she'll tell me she wants to push. And that's what happened. And we had a beautiful, beautiful 8-pound little girl.
I think that speaks in so many ways to midwifery and what it is and how it is. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the spiritual aspect of midwifery, the other sides that, not just the competencies. You were speaking about listening and respect there. Share a little bit
Yes.
more.
Because I don't think we listen to women too much. And I can say, for being in the business, and especially, I think home birth midwives have more empathy. But working in the system, if one is not careful, one can begin to not trust women's ability to do what we've been beginning to do from the beginning of time. And I learned to listen to women. I think it's important to listen to women and listen to where they are and not where you think they ought to be, to humble yourself and meet them at their door. And once that is done, then they become friends to you. I'm not friends, but a whole way, especially for Black women, because we do not trust the system.
That's
We do
right.
not trust providers. And one of the skills I think that I've perfected and I'm good at, I suspect it's because I come from a small little town. And I basically trust people that, I trust that who you say you are, you are. And it comes across in my relationship. And I find it easy to talk to my clients, not as patients because they're not sick, but as people. Like, I'm a person, and my small town and trusted nature, I think, has allowed me to develop that and make people feel comfortable. And I remember when I was in my practice with Cambridge midwives, they would say to me, how you get them to tell you all these things? How you know all this? I said, because they just tell me. you know they
Right.
would come in and they would tell me. And coming from a home birth background, I was very personal. When I was in the practice during that time, we had pagers and all this other stuff, and then cell phones came. But even now, here that I work for the Department of Health, where there's no respect for women, it's based on these very power and control modules, like most midwifery systems are within the system. They all have my phone numbers. They become my friends. And this is a small town. And that's my small town mentality works pretty well. because we're friends. And since you're not sick and you're coming to me for a service that I'm able to do, and I don't look at it, it's a very personal relationship with each of my families, because everyone's situation is different. And I think being a small town country girl from the rainforest in Panama makes me good at that. I've acknowledged that as one of my skills. I'm very easy to talk and get along with people without judgment.
Well, and talking about that way of being, which I think is so inbuilt in midwifery. You mentioned, for example, like the home birth midwives have a little bit more of an edge maybe in these ways,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. They do, because we're more personal. And
right?
when
More
you go,
autonomy.
yes, exactly. That's what it is. And when you go, you're going to visit somebody in their gates. It changes the dynamics, you know?
Well, the thing I think is really important, Mac, I'm going to stop you because your camera's spinning at this point. Are you?
Yeah, no, I got it. I got this stuff labeled. I just shouldn't move. I just can't move. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. So the autonomy is one piece. But I also think about, well, for example, midwives, historically, we consider ourselves the guardians of normal birth, the guardians of maternity, right? Like,
Absolutely.
speak about how inside of what we have to contend with the westernized, modernized, colonized midwifery that
Oh,
we are up against, how do we stay guardians? And in that gap, I mean, you started out that way. You were working in a community, in an underground position of providing access to something that is sacred and was needed and was requested of you. But inside of our systems, I'm talking about particularly the United States. I know you're in the
mhm.
Virgin Islands currently, but the US system, where midwifery is not even normal still to this day. How do we midwives, wherever we're working, because you've been in the institution as well as in the home, how do
Yes.
how do we hold guardianship?
One of the things we have to do, first of all, I must admit, living in Africa and being called to the profession there really made a qualitative difference. I had never, before I went to the continent, I was I went to, I started college at 18, graduated, and went to Tanzania in 1972. I had never seen a baby being born. I would hear sometimes when somebody didn't make it to the dispensary, or and when I grew up in my town, or made it to the hospital, sometimes babies would precept at home in my little town. But I had never seen with my own little two eyes how simple the process is. And having witnessed that, and the calmness with which it was, I mean, I don't know, it really, really moved me to make it seem like we had created a mountain out of a molehouse, and we didn't a mole house, and we didn't have to. It made me look at it as just as much as you go in and take a shower. It's just part of life. And that's the way it was treated. And having witnessed that, and can I tell you something funny? The woman apologized for having another girl.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know then that, that, hey, by the way, that wasn't your decision. It was his, because he carries the two and you carry the XX. So that was fun. And so that really started me along, like I said, with going to visit with Aisha in Morogoro, and then getting more and more involved with birth, nutrition, health, women's wellness, all those things in one. And it kind of lifted us taking and teaching each other how to do our own pap smears and all of that stuff that we were
Yeah.
doing in the 70s. It brought it all to light and together. And so the only part was that I'd never really envisioned midwifery. I've just looked at it in the 70s as taking back our bodies. Africa made me want to do midwifery because the simplicity and this, I don't know, to see a woman take her strength and her power. I don't know how to say it other than it moved me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, this is one consistent thing we can say through humanity. It's been this way. It is still this way. Whatever we can come up with and cook up to thwart that, to disempower that, doesn't work for long because it's always there inherently, right? Like you said, it's part of a normal life function and it will continue. So, with that, we've got such a horrendous historical, structural, broken way of supporting childbearing and maternity, such that the foot soldiers, the folk on the ground who are trying to impact that, to trying to re-empower, to support the self-determination and autonomy of women and birthing people, we're in a movement rather than in a profession. Is that how you feel? Because that's how I feel. I think that's really where we're at this point because we are stuck
It's the
trying to
system.
dismantle.
It's the system. And you're right. If you had told me that we would be where we are now after the 70s and the home births and the Boston Women's Health Collective, our bodies, ourselves, with a C-section rate of less than 2%, to now where over a third of our babies are born through surgical deliveries. If you had told me that, I would have said, excuse me, like we'll say here, you's a liar, you's a lie, my son. But it has happened, and it really underscored the importance to see that birth here is part of the system, and the system is an anti-woman, anti-people of color system that was born on eliminating the native people of this land, enslaving others, and a small group of billionaires having control over the masses. And then the lowest of these levels within the masses are women. And women are in a very precarious position, not only here, but globally, because once you have a baby, you have to eat, you have to, you become dependent on other people to help sustain you, even if it's for a brief period in time. And men may leave, some stay, but you are forced to raise your children. And in this world we live in, you have to eat, you got to have a place to, it really is, because all our children are born, how they're raised really has implications for our humanity.
Yes.
So that's how I see it. And that's why I am happy I was called. And I know now, I don't think that's why midwifery has always been suppressed or eliminated.
Yep. And I mean, we go all the way back. You can think about times when midwives are mentioned, midwives are standing in those gaps time and time again.
I went to the lady that I just caught her baby. Her father is a minister, very conservative, Black family, nice family, very supportive, loving family. And it's just to me to imagine the kind of stuff that women globally are going through. As this world moves to the right, people of color and women are suffering. And I'm not sure how to fix it. It's like we're headed back to ground one. And I tell people all the time, what's one of my biggest quotations from the Bible? It says, and God so loved the midwives, for they did not what Pharaoh said. They saved the babies, and the people increased in number and in strength. Midwives, I've always been for justice and equity, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, whether you're this or that, or whether you are animist. we have always been the protectors of humanity.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about how do we protect ourselves? How
Exactly.
have you prevailed, Magda, to be your age? You don't say your age out loud, but you're up there, but to be so grounded, so gorgeous, so everything, all the things. You are every woman, it's all in you.
Oh,
How did you manage to preserve your health, sanity, everything that's taken you to get to this point? We last talked about you were in Ann Arbor. Where did you go from there? And along the way, how have you figured out how to take care of yourself?
because one of the things I have even when I didn't know that much, I knew that I had to take care of myself first. I had to love me first before I could love. And I learned to love me. Women are not very good at loving themselves because we're not raised that way.
Right.
I had three older brothers. I was the youngest of five siblings. My parents were poor. My father worked for the Panama Canal Company for almost 50 years and waited for 3 months before he even knew what he was going to get for pension. My
Mm-hmm.
mother cleaned white people's house up the hill, the white people's hill, we called it, and for $1, sometimes $2 a day. But I was raised with a lot of pride and self-respect from both my parents, who insisted that you're not going to fall, meaning I was not going to do like happened to a lot of young women during my period. Fall meaning that you got pregnant, so you got to get kicked out of school and you're not grad, and that you were going to make something of yourselves, because neither of them went beyond the third grade.
Mm-hmm.
So and being the youngest and having had my three older brothers and my sister ahead of me, I mean, I had a lot of support to exceed, because they were all graduated in the top five of their class. So I had, it's not that I'm boasting, but the Millets were known to be very smart. So I had a certain standard that was expected of me. I lived in a small town of 900 people. So I learned that you can't just do what the hell you want to do. You got to live in community. So that community always kept me in control, even though I was kind of rebellious even then. um I I knew that I had to be grounded in community, in family, and doing what's right.
So, like, as you moved through your midwifery career, did you create community around you?
All the time. I don't know how to live. I don't know how to live without having my pasiera or my comadre. Your comadre and your compadres are your co-mothers and your co-fathers. And you all be, my mother said you can't have more close friends than you have a hand in your fingers in your hand, because each of those relationship has to be nurtured. So I know people, but your 1, 2 and your core group is always very small. And I've always remembered that. And I am a very community, small town. That's why I'm thriving here in St. Croix. I mean, it's bigger than my town, but it's a small little place. It's what we got, about 50,000 people, including children and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff. It's very small. So, there's the checks and balances from living in community. You can't do what the hell you want to do, but you learn to be a good person and know that your life is intricately linked to others. You can't survive without it.
I think as well, we bring in our midwifery work, our the family side of it. Like we
Yes.
take care of not just the birthing person, that mama, but the dad and the auntie and the neighbor and the grandma and whoever joins in and is part of their immediate community are also centered. We talk about patient-centered care, but it really is family-centered care,
I love that.
community-centered care, right?
You are so right, because it changes the onus of a relationship when you
Indeed.
go to someone's house.
Right.
When I go to, and I learn so much, and in many of my clients' eyes, they look at me as a doctor midwife. When there's a problem, they come to me, because I'm an old school midwife. I believe in alternative healing. And one of the things I liked about that program is that it expanded my knowledge in caring for women beyond. We have a lot of women with PCOS We own fibroids. We have a lot of metabolic syndrome in our communities, in our families. And I am now able to go beyond midwifery and be like an advanced practice registered nurse, because I can care for people with those conditions. And while I may assist them in balancing their bodies, I can also influence them on how they can change their lives. People really don't believe. They think that that high blood pressure is a natural thing. I have to tell them, no, you don't have to have high blood pressure. You don't have to have diabetes. You don't have to get obese. Those things are not given. And so I'm able to become like their old doctor midwives. It wasn't my intention, but the goddess has guided me that way, because I care for families, because when I go, I can say, you see things when you go into people's homes and you get to know them. And it's that relationship. I guess it's my Gambo nature. I love that. I love the intimacy of care. And I love doing this work. I love my relationships with my families. And they teach me as much as, and care for me as much as I care for them. Not to digress, but even when I found this place that I'm living in now, it was through a birth. And I was kicked out of the apartment that I had been living in to find a place in a week, because I'm leaving for my daughter's wedding. And I had no place to go. And lo and behold, doing a home birth from a client. She wasn't actually a client. I still go to her gym class. And she I had sent her to see you. And I think, as a matter of fact, I'd sent her to Florida because she had been traumatized by her first birth. And I said, you go, I have a friend there, and that was you. And then she decided to come home and do a home birth. We did the home birth, and I found this house. It's just a little house. It's just so wonderful. And they love me and I love them. And here it is, I have a community, and you are involved. Because
Well, you're speaking, I think, about midwifery's healing to us as midwives, as healing as it is to the families that we serve.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's so interesting how that works. Makeda, you've shared so much. Talk to me about, what are we going to do about these young'uns that are coming up behind us? How are we truly, authentically going to help them? Because they're coming in droves. They're being called. They want to serve. They want to do school. They want to do all these things. And of course, they want to come out the other end and practice. And I feel that so keenly, how do we keep it real? How do we do it right? How do we provide this pathway and this mentoring for these young'uns, the littles who are behind us in this work? Because we are moving past and through our elderhood, we have to be able to pass it on to them.
We do. We do. And
good advice.
I just joined this group called BIPOC. I'd been looking at their thing, and I said, let me join it. And I'm glad I have, because what I see, it's so American what's happened to the whole thing. The way this whole thing, doulas took off, and birth workers, and everybody is doing all of this stuff. And then to think that it was my practice that wrote a $20,000 grant, and we educated and trained the first 20 birth sisters, not doulas, because doula, I don't like the word, even though it means slave. And we changed it to birth sisters. It's taken off, but sometimes I'm concerned and worried, because when people said, oh, you're a doula, I said, no, I'm not. You're a birth sister. No, I'm not. I'm a midwife. I said, I did not study for 20 hours. I mean, I studied for years. I went to a formal school, and even after formal school and formal midwifery and practicing home birth, I still had to convince myself that I was a midwife and I could do this. No, it takes years. But like in America, everything gets, I don't know. Everything loses its purpose. And so I'm concerned about that. I'm very concerned, because everyone is a birth worker now, and charging all these exorbitant things. And sometimes I hear some of the things being said, and suggested that sometimes worries me, but I listen and I learn and I interject and intervene when I think I should. I'm happy in one way that it is growing, but I'm not sure that I like the direction in which it's going into. But I must remember that organizations and systems reflect the social system within which it is, and this is a capitalist society. So I just have to hope that I always try to bring the human aspect of it all, because I truly, truly, truly know, I don't believe anymore that if a baby is born with its capacity to love intact, we can eliminate wars, we can eliminate a lot of stuff, but too many babies are being born in fear and in anger and in cruel ways, even in places where midwives took place, because I had worked in places where midwives are mean to clients. I've worked in places, not only in the US, but on the continent and everywhere, where people would say mean things to birthing women. And so I believe in humanized birth and humanized practice. And I think we have much more ability to do that with traditional midwifery, because that's our background. And we can highlight it and make that number one way, and not looking at pregnancy as an illness, but as part of who we are as human beings. And so that's my role, and that's how I see midwifery. And that when I think of the grand midwives, and I think of, the only difference is that from the grand midwives gave and gave and gave. And one of the things women do is that they give and give. I think that we have to receive as much as we give so we can keep balance, because we have to bring balance in the world. And I think midwives are the ones that are capable of doing that. They have in the past. And like I said, the Talmud, the Quran, the Bible, and all spiritual books have the same verse. God so loved the midwives, for they did not what Pharaoh or king or whoever the tyrant was say. They saved the babies. And that's the kind of midwives I try to be. And you and many
are that the modeling that you do and continue for all of us, Magda, is so deeply impactful and powerful.
Oh, I'm humbled. Thank you. We have to, I went to bed the other day crying. Um, I went to bed crying, literally crying. What is it? How do I get to this? I don't know what happened. Hello?
Yeah, I can see you. I can hear you, but you're frozen.
I know. How do I do this?
Let's wait a second. Let's see.
Okay, let me see. Okay.
There we are.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hold it still there. Okay. So
Okay.
you went to bed crying.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. When I see what's happening with this madman, and if you had told me that we would be back doing this stuff, I would have said you're not. What's happening now really bothers me. And I think that especially now, midwifery needs to be exalted to its traditional roots, because we need more babies being born with their ability to love intact, to counter the fascist white right movement that's going on. I really do believe that that's my last fight in this last phase of my earth journey. I feel that I'm compelled to do it. And I think that midwifery has historically led people to a better life. And so that's how I see that we can have an impact. And that's what I've dedicated myself to do, because I know that we can. Because look at what happened when midwifery became king here. The midwifery practices that arose and even in hospitals, vaginal births after C-section, low C-section rates, high breastfeeding rates. The one thing we didn't fight for successfully was to get 16 and 18-month leaves, which they are able to get in most of Europe.
Yes.
Because I became very tired of women not wanting to get close to their babies because they had to go back to work.
Yeah.
And
there's still no maternity leave in the United States. This doesn't exist. None, not even weeks. There is nothing.
And it's and that's why there's so much madness and MAGA and all these people, because our babies are feeling disconnected from their humanity because their mothers don't have time to nurture them as they ought to be nurtured. And they're not paid to do it. You know, in Switzerland, which is not the most progressive country in Europe, where my daughter lived, she could have had her baby at home, in the hospital, or a birth center. All right.
And maternity leave is standard policy.
Yes.
And
16 months. And
Mhm.
that's not 16 months. She was, you know, she had a maternity leave. Holland has 18 months.
Yes.
And not only does the mother get it, the father gets it too. And if you don't use it, it can accumulate for the next child if you don't, whatever time you don't use. Yeah. In Norway, it's the same thing. Now, they went through World War I and World War II being fought on their land where they were totally demolished. And they have been able to know that we have to do something about, one, protecting the way babies are born and protecting families when babies are born so they can be nurtured and not raised. We don't do that here in America. Think about it.
Well, we've taken away something that for millennia has been a certain way and will continue to be a certain way unless we find these perverse ways of thwarting that. And we have become adept in the most resourced country in the entire world, in the history of the world. We have managed to be dead last as far as outcomes, mortality, morbidity, and the harms that aren't even measured.
Thank you. You're making me want to cry. And
well, let's not do that, because you know what? This is the thing here. What I see and what I found as we've been sharing with yourself and other elders and other midwives, the US midwives, we have found a way to prevail anyway. Because
all the time.
We are here. And so I want to thank you, Makeda. I feel very emotional as well, but I want to thank you for all of the things that you have done and continue to do. But I want to especially thank you for pausing with me today and sharing your story, sharing your sacred story. And I pray that your hands and your heart and your history continue to guide us.
Oh, thank you, my sister. And the same to you. You have been a jewel to us. I have always admired your ability. You're an excellent organizer. You're excellent at bringing people together. I'm getting very emotional. I'm very good at one-to-one. I'm a country girl. I'm a home, small, but I really admire your abilities. And we are all needed because we're living in serious times, very serious times. Very, very serious times. And the only thing, I know this may sound crazy, the only thing we can do is to get midwives and midwives trained not to be midwives, but to be midwives. Because I think once our babies, I keep saying this, are born with their capacity to love intact, and mothers are paid for nurturing these young human beings, that we could be a better society and humanity could come of age. That's my hope.
Ashe. Ashe-yo.
Mm-hmm.
I love you.
Love you too, my sister. Okay, peace. All right.